Committee on the Guam U.S. Military Relocation, Public Safety, and Judiciary is hereby convened. The only item on the agenda, like was mentioned earlier, is Bill number 353-33 COR, an act relative to add a new section 1N6 to Chapter 4-5 of Public Law 33-66 relative to providing authorization to the Department of Corrections for payments on all obligations incurred in prior fiscal year. In accordance with the open government law, I would like to notify the community that on July 26th, the initial notification was forwarded out to our stakeholders as well as to our media partners. And then the second notice was sent out on the 29th of July, which is last Friday. So that being the case, we are now entertaining Bill number 353-33. We have one individual, the Acting Director of Department of Corrections, Mr. and Senator Tony Lamarena. Just for the information of the community, I think the title of this particular proposal is self-explanatory in terms of allowing Department of Corrections the flexibility to be able to deal with their prior year obligations in this fiscal year. So that in fact, if the Chief Executive is able to identify resources that they can pay off some of their outstanding obligations that was carried over into fiscal year 16. So that being the case, Senator Lamarena, if you would like to identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony, please.
Avade, Senator Aguon, Chairman of the Committee on Guam U.S. Military Relocation, Public Safety, and Judiciary. My name is Alberto Lamarena, also known as Tony, Acting Director of the Department of Corrections. I am appearing before you today to testify in favor of Bill 353-33 COR. I would like to thank the author, Senator Frank B. Aguon Jr., for introducing legislation that will allow the Department of Corrections the flexibility to use current funds for prior year obligations. Due to various reasons, the department has accumulated prior year obligations and wants to make good on these debts, but is restricted due to current language in the budget law. By affording the department the opportunity to use financial resources, we have the capacity to identify any lapsed funds to address those concerns. As the legislature moves forward in approving a new fiscal year budget, would also greatly appreciate this language be included so that we can continue to identify and address any prior obligations that remain. Again, thank you for providing me this opportunity to testify, and I humbly ask for your support in passing Bill 353-33 COR into law. Si Dios masi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamarena, for your testimony this evening. Just a couple of questions with regards to this. I know that the intent is to ensure that at least the Department of Corrections and the Chief Executive and the Executive Branch has the flexibility to take care of some of these prior year obligations. Are you aware, since your arrival to the Department of Corrections, in terms of what prior year obligations remain outstanding within the department?
Senator, in my short tenure there, we're still compiling a lot of the prior obligations. Our ASO, who also just came on board a few months prior to me, has been tasked to do that, and so we're continuing to find additional prior obligations. Currently, we've identified, just in the for the last 3 or 4 years, about $1.5 million, and this goes from Civil Service Commission settlements to GMH to various other expenses that the department has incurred. So again, we want to make good on these debts. As we find the funds, we'd like to pay them off, and we want to thank you for allowing us to do that by allowing us to provide language to allow us to use current funding for prior obligations.
Thank you very much, Senator. And you did identify approximately, you were able to be informed of approximately $1.5 million in
Right.
prior year obligations.
And Senator, that could grow once our ASO and myself finish reviewing all the outstanding debts. This amount more than likely will grow.
Can I direct you to a Freedom of Information request for DOC prior year obligations dated April 28,
Okay.
2016, where in fact, as a result of a FOIA request for prior year obligation information, your predecessor had provided information as it applies to everything to that date that they
Okay.
identified. So that identifies not only overtime, which was addressed shortly thereafter after this letter was received. So I really appreciate Department of Corrections catching up with their prior year overtime as well as the current fiscal year overtime up until that date, April 28th. But then you also have additional obligations to vendors. I have one for JRNA air conditioning sales and service, another to Total Malik, another one is to HSP, which is Health Services of the Pacific, and then also to GMH, and several, you alluded to several cases, not only with the Civil Service Commission, but also there's a civil case, 1360-10. So, Mr. Lamarina, I'd like to ask you to please review that, and if I can request from you, how soon would you be able to provide, at least to your knowledge, current information as it applies to prior year obligations?
Okay. Senator, if you can give me maybe a couple weeks, because I know that our ASO and myself are currently looking at everything.
Okay.
And it will probably take us a couple weeks to finally get everything so that we can have it ready
Okay.
for you.
Like I shared with you, I know that your current ASO may have been the individual that assisted with the preparation of the April 28th communication to the committee. So you may want to
Right.
discuss that with her and find out if, in fact, with the exception of the overtime, because that was addressed up through April and the first week of May of this year. So do you have any outstanding overtime at this point?
You know, I know we're current up to the last pay period,
Okay.
and we're working very closely with the U.S. Department of Labor to ensure that we continue paying on time. So
Please, thank you, because that was a major
Right.
expense item up until that April letter. But if you can review that, and then
Okay.
in 2 weeks' time, if you can provide in writing your findings as the incoming director, as the acting director of Department of Corrections, in terms of what you've been able to identify as outstanding obligations.
Right.
Okay, and then we'll cross-reference it with the information that was provided on the 28th of April, and then we'll proceed forward. I think the intent here is, and I appreciate in your letter, Mr. Lamarina, that you requested a continuation in the language. I will discuss that with the Appropriations Chair. The issue with allowing the continuation in the language is that I really want to make sure that every concerted effort is made in this fiscal year to try to address most, if not all, of the outstanding prior year obligations. And then we will work into the next fiscal year, subject to things that will take place in November and in January. But we'll work towards making sure that a similar flexibility will be provided to the department based on information that we receive at during those times. Okay, so we will work on with my colleagues. I will work with my colleagues and the committee members to see what we can do to expedite the passage of this particular legislation, provide the tool, and then hopefully some of these outstanding obligations can be addressed prior to the conclusion of this fiscal year. Okay.
thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Lamar. I appreciate your attendance this afternoon. This concludes the hearing on Bill number 353-33. And if anyone would like to provide written testimony, please forward that information to my office, and by the close of business Wednesday next week. Close of business Wednesday next week, and then we will conclude with the committee report on this piece of legislation and forward it to the Committee of Rules for consideration by the body. Thank you very much.